Hi guys, welcome back. As you may notice, my background has changed. I'm back in Chicago, so that's why. And yeah, this video is going to be about the economic classes I've taken at UChicago, why I chose this major, and advice I have in general. So to start off, for anyone who goes to Chicago, it's known that we have the top economics program. And there's a saying that if you go to Chicago and you don't even take one economics class, that's a problem. So I highly encourage you to take at least one class while you're there. Just experience it. I know principles of microeconomics and principles of macroeconomics are pretty popular courses. There's also a new one called economics for everyone, so don't be afraid if you're a beginner, haven't ever taken an economics class before, because there are new courses that will help you build that foundation. In terms of the major, there is like a core, 4 core classes that you need to take called the elements of economic analysis, and these are the ones that go in depth with the calculations. So you'll be learning Lagrangian functions, doing supply and demand, taking derivatives of equations to figure out what a consumer's optimal choice would be given the price of goods and the production and supply. Over the course, you'll see how taxes and subsidies may also impact people's behaviors, and as the market grows, there could be more than one supplier, and how these different scenarios of supply and demand play out. So once you have those courses out of the way, you can start doing more fun classes, or the electives, so to say. There's so many you can choose from. I think the popular ones tend to be economics of sports, economics of crime, there's industrial organization, creativity. There's definitely a lot out there, so I'm just going to talk about the ones that I've taken. So yeah, the first one is game theory and economic applications. So think about prisoner's dilemma. So we learn about a bunch of different strategies that players would have in a game, such as dominant strategy, mixed strategies, tit for tat, and we even get to play some games in class with our peers to see how people would react in a single played game, in a one-time game versus a repeated game over time, because sometimes decisions or behaviors would change if people know that they'll continue interacting with that person for a while and they can build a reputation. So it's easier for you to guess what the other person would do the next round, and you can also build some trust that way as well. And how that changes when you're on the last round, because you know you won't ever see that person again, so how that would affect the decision you make. So the last course I took was Econometrics, and this class, I took it towards the end of my major, so it's recommended to do it by the end of your third year, because it really builds upon the past courses and you get to do a final project at the end. A lot of this class is focused on analyzing data sets through the computer and drawing conclusions. I think we did a bit of coding, learned Bootstrap, and yeah, the final project could either be a paper by yourself or with a partner. And there was a lot of single and multiple linear regression models that you had to do. Okay, so the next course I took was behavioral economics, and it links together economics and psychology, which are two of the most interesting topics to me, I would say, because I wanted to study economics because I wanted to see how people made decisions based on the cost and benefits of each circumstance, and that was what was interesting to me. I love understanding how the mind works and why people act the way that they do. So I tend to read a lot of books by Malcolm Gladwell, just to see how people perceive situations and interpret their advantages and disadvantages, and how they overcome challenges in that way. So yeah, back to the course. we read a lot of papers regarding how people react to signals. So for example, I think there was one paper that talked about different credit cards and what they symbolize to the public for a user. So there's a concept called keeping up with the Jonases, and used to show that you kept up with the socioeconomic classes or the culture, and yeah, whatever your neighbor has, you try to have. And the constant comparing yourself to your neighbor in terms of material goods and accumulation of wealth. Next course I took was also pretty popular. It's called UChicago Economics, People, and Seminal Ideas. So this one was almost like a history of UChicago course, kind of. We would also have guest speakers come in and study different historical figures, such as Veblen, Knight, Hayek, Stigler, Coase, and Becker. So one of the concepts we talked about was Veblen's conspicuous consumption, meaning that people would purchase goods in higher quantity or higher quality than what is necessary or practical. So like two aspects that go into this would be serviceability and honorifics. So whether that item itself is functional or not, and the signal that you want to send to others of your wealth or of your status. So next concept is saltwater economics versus freshwater economics, and this is relevant to the coast, I would say. So east and west coasts of the US, so schools such as Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, they would be considered saltwater economists, and freshwater economist would be UChicago and any other schools around the Great Lakes. So the main difference is that saltwater economists prefer that the government regulates the markets and interferes whenever they see an issue. So for example, if they were to create monetary policies or control interest rates and budgets to avoid inflation or recession. And then for freshwater economists, they believe more in terms of the free markets and laissez-faire. So less government interference, because they believe that people inherently have rational expectations and that the market would take this into account before the government even performs an action. So for example, if there's high unemployment and inflation, such as in the 1970s, freshwater economists believe that people would have already reacted to this by either accepting lower wages or lowering prices in a way that the market would have already corrected itself before the government comes in to give unemployment benefits. So that's an example. And then increased government spending would only result in more inflation. So in this case, it wouldn't be as helpful. But saltwater economists believe that people are not always irrational, so that is why the government needs to take more control of the situation. And then you'll learn more about fiscal versus monetary policies in the course called Economic Policy Analysis. And you'll get to learn theoretical and empirical approaches to these real-world problems. So the next class I took is Economic Analysis of Law, which is the application of the choice theory of economics to the opportunities in legal environments. So for example, what are the probabilities that a person would return a lost wallet or keep a promise or even adhere to what's stated in a will, given the applicable rules and regulations. So this class is very interesting because you get to analyze different cases like a lawyer would, and then see it from an economic perspective. So there's a lot of analysis of contracts, torts, and property laws. So one concept that I remember is the Peltzman Effect, which is arguing whether increased safety measures actually have the effect that they wanted to, because it might be offset by behavioral changes. So for example, if people were required to wear seatbelts in their cars, does that actually make driving safer? Because if people know that this is meant to protect them, they might drive more recklessly on the streets, and so for the end result, it might not be fulfilling the same purpose that it should. So for example, if there are seatbelts in cars, drivers might drive more recklessly given that they know they're protected. So seatbelts don't always guarantee 100% more safety on the streets. So this is basically saying that any safety gains that drivers might get from increased safety measures, they could probably be offset by behavioral changes. So this is kind of like a deciding. So this is saying that drivers who feel safer might drive more recklessly, and at the end of the day, there could be more harm to the passengers or cyclists and pedestrians on the streets. Okay, well, that's just a brief introduction to all the economics classes I've taken at UChicago, and if you'd like to read more in detail, you can also check out my blog, so I'll link that down below. And if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer quicker, feel free to post in the comments, and I'll write a post in my blog so everyone has access to that. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and please let me know what else you would like to see next. Thank you. Bye.